Hey there, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo.
Woo! I'm Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And my woo was way cuter than your woo. We're here today. I don't even know what Adam's covering. He said something true crime. Maybe he changed it up. I don't know.
I totally did.
You did?
100%.
Okay, I am doing Final Destination 2. Not the movie. But my second episode of like Final Destination-esque topics.
Right on. This week, I'm going to be covering what is known as the Demon Core, which sounds
that sounds really cool, but
pretty awesome.
Is it awesome?
I mean, it's horrifying. 100%. Definitely a crazy topic, so I'm kind of excited to get to it. But before we do that, let's go ahead and talk about how things have been for the last week.
New job past week, so that was cute, super fun. Everyone's nice. Other than that, we did do San Diego Comic-Con.
Yeah,
Adam
just for
is
one
a
day.
lobster.
Yeah, we stood outside. Here's the thing: we were like trying to find events to do outside San Diego Comic-Con because we did not have passes to go inside. So we found a bunch of stuff. Shout out to Ralph. Shout out to Marsha. You're both amazing. They found a bunch of stuff to do outside of the convention hall. And we were all coordinating what we were going to try and do. We wound up going to this place right across from Petco Park, which is where the San Diego Padres play. And they had a bunch of stuff in a giant parking lot. And a lot of it was Nintendo-based. So we're like, let's go over there, see if we can get into some Nintendo shit. So we go in. All those events are like done. And then we're like, all right, well, I guess let's just go sit down at a picnic table and figure out what we want to do because there was shade there. And then there was this like big thing called Zoa, which is an energy drink, right next to the picnic tables. And there was some people like crowding around and we figured they were giving out free merch or whatever. And then like we're getting ready to leave and someone walks by, like one of the workers, and they tell someone in the crowd like, yeah, the Rock will be here in less than an hour. And so we're like the Rock? And then I'm realizing like the O in Zoa is like his tattoo. So I'm like, oh, that must be like his brand and it's Comic-Con. He's going to be Black Adam. So we decided, like, let's hang out, wait for The Rock.
An hour turned to 2 hours.
And we're standing there with no shade because we wanted to be, like, close up to the railing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But he did show up. He 100% showed up. I mean,
Adam was like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to record. I'm not going to take pictures. You got to do it for me because I want to touch him.
I just want to reach out and see if he'll touch me. And I could have just reached out and, like, touched him and had, like, a million bodyguards beat the shit out of me, who are all tiny in comparison to The Rock.
Oh, yeah.
They're his mini bosses.
Absolutely.
For sure. But he was super nice. Like, the guy in front of us, like, held out, like, a fist, and he fist bumped him on the way in.
Yeah, it was really cute.
It seemed like they were trying to get him out to his next thing, but he wanted to, like, stop and, like, talk to people there at the front of the crowd. He took selfies, and, like, he hugged someone who, like, told some emotional story to him, and it was super cool. He's very, very nice. He's very huge.
His skin. Like,
he has great skin.
Great skin.
You would think someone who works out and sweats constantly would probably have, like, rougher skin. But nah, dog. Like, that dude.
Smooth like a baby's bottom.
Yeah, he looked great. So, and he was very nice to everyone. It was really cool to see. So,
does that sound kind of serial killer of me to be like, no. His skin?
You just said he had nice skin. You didn't say, like, I would wear that skin. That would be serial killery. But yeah, he was super nice. And then after that, we're like, all right, what do we do now? And then we went to a Dragon Ball thing, which was fun. The chick who took my picture with the Ginyu Force fucked it up. Like, I waited in line to get a picture with, like, these giant Ginyu statues. And then the photographer switched out. She took my phone and, like, walked in. So, like, it was just me and, like, two of the Ginyu members, like, arms. And, like, that was it. And then me and Robin took one, which is okay. But then we have, like, if we want to just say it's a picture just me and Robin, then, like...
It's cute.
Why are there these weird white-gloved hands in the picture? So that was kind of disappointing. I did get a selfie in front of the giant Vegeta statue, which was like 20 feet tall, which was awesome. So yeah, overall it was fun. Went and got to see the Adventure Zone live, which was so amazing. I was kind of upset. We tried to get 4 tickets. We only got 2. Me and Marsha are the biggest Adventure Zone fans in the group, so we went to go see them. And that was funny because she's like, it's at Balboa Park. So we got in an Uber, we went to the park. I was like, there doesn't seem to be a venue here for an Adventure Zone. And so I was just like, can you check the address? It was Balboa Theater. So our Uber guy was like, just add a new destination. And we went right back to where we had left. It was like 2 blocks away from where we were. And we wound up getting there just in time. We sat down. Travis ran a one-shot, which was amazing. They're all so incredibly funny. They did the movie Big with Tom Hanks. They did a reference to that during it. And I was just like, the episode that had just released the day before of Storytime Bloodlines, the first episode in our D&D one-shot, absolutely had a big reference in it.
Maybe
And
he listens to the podcast.
if he did, that would have been amazing, but I don't think that was the case. They're all very, very good at improv, and they're all just very funny naturally, and it's very impressive to witness in live form. So I had a blast. I know that you guys went and you got... I didn't realize this until today, until Julia showed me pictures you guys took at one of the things you went to. There was a Quantum Leap picture opportunity.
Yep.
And I am so upset I didn't wind up making it there, because, like, I'm the one who watched Quantum Leap when it was on TV. I'm the only one old enough.
How does the theme song go?
It's very
God.
disappointing I didn't get a picture with it. But
Yeah, we went to like the sci-fi thing and Peacock and NBC and stuff. And that was fun. It was cool. We had a good time. We had some pasta. We did stiff.
You went and got pasta. I went and got steak at a really fancy, expensive steakhouse that when we got there, we were just like, maybe we don't want to stay here. And we decided, like, fuck
But
it,
as
we'll
long
stay.
as you guys had good food, that's all that matters.
Yeah,
so.
It was a very interesting, very fun Saturday. Shout out to Jen and Jess and Julia and Mama Kang. They all came with as well.
Yeah,
they toughed it out through all of it.
Shout out to my sister who got me like Gundams.
Man, we had so many people buy merch for us. Like, Ralph bought merch for us. Liz bought merch for us. Marsha bought a shit ton of merch
Shout out
for
to
us.
Marsha.
So thank you to everyone. I mean, it's not like we didn't pay them for it, but you still got to carry that shit around, man. It's not like that shit just magically teleports to your hotel, which I think all of them had hotels that they had to, like, take an Uber or a train or whatever to get to. So
yeah.
It's not like it was an easy thing, and everyone was so nice and volunteered to take care of us like that. So thank you all. But yeah, I think Saturday was a big busy day, and then Sunday was like, chill out, let's all rest. I was so fucking sunburned
Adam
from waiting for the rock.
Still so red.
My neck is like so dark right now. It's super painful, but my arms and my face are settling into a nice tan for now. So
yeah, you are much more tan.
yes, it's been a while since I actually got a full blown tan. So we'll see how this works out.
And it was free.
Yeah, it was totally free. All I had to do was stand in the sun and cook while I waited for the rock for 2 hours. So
that night, Adam was like, "I've absorbed so much radiation."
I told Robin this story of one of my friends who did some stupid stuff, and I won't repeat it because it's definitely personal. But the long story short is, the end of the night, he laid on his bed and just cried quietly, and I was laying in my bed, which is in the same room, trying to sleep, and all I could hear was like. And I was just like, shut the fuck up. Like, I got so annoyed. Like, you're dealing with the consequences of your actions. This is your fault. And then Saturday night, I was like laying in the bed. I came to bed before everyone else. I was just laying in here covered in owl, like, and I felt that pain finally. But yeah, all right. We've bloviated for a while here. So let's go ahead and jump into our first topic, I think. But yeah, that's what happened to us this past weekend. Yeah. So fun stuff. All right, so this week I decided that I wanted to cover something that's definitely scary, but not in a supernatural way. I suppose it could be considered supernatural if you're, like, afraid of science, if you're one of those people who's like, black magic, when you see someone, like, mixing two things together that causes bubbles.
Some of the stuff that happens with chemistry and science is fucking magic.
I mean, people thought gunpowder was legitimately magic when it was invented, so, because people didn't know what it was. And then all of a sudden it's like, what, that sand goes boom? Magic.
But, like, think about it, right? You drop a pure block of sodium into water and it explodes.
Yeah.
And then you think about what salt is, and you're like, how the fuck do I eat this? You know what I mean? Science is absolutely mind-blowing.
It is, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's important that if, like, a caveman were to do what I'm about to tell you, somehow, some way, they would look at it as some sort of dark magic or necromancy, because it's like beyond their understanding. But if they could somehow replicate those effects, you might be like, yeah, this is somehow like supernatural. It really makes me wonder how many things that have happened in the past were actually in some way, shape, or form just some form of like non-understood science, misunderstood, or just outright not understood. Because some things are kind of crazy. But anyways, I'm going to cover some of the crazy and sad stuff that happened surrounding an object known as the Demon Core. So the story I'm about to tell you is true. And I say that because a lot of times I give you like the warning up front, the disclaimer of this could all be bullshit. I mean, this is a fairly documented story because a lot of this stuff is very famous. So some of you actually might have heard of this, but can we really trust anything we hear? Who knows? They could have made all this shit up. They 100% could have, so.
I've never heard of it, and I'm very excited because it sounds like something like science fiction or fantasy type thing. You know, the demon
It
core.
definitely has that name, and that's not the first name it had. But, like, I've heard this story before. I heard it again recently, and when I heard it, I was like, I've heard of this. Like, it just clicked because I've seen a movie where they depict what happened here, and John Cusack is one of the characters. So
Really?
I might be giving away some stuff if you're like, I fucking know where he's going with this. But anyways, I decided I was going to try and find the most reliable sources, so I went and found as much information as I could at a place called the Internet, where everything is true. So that said,
God damn it.
This story takes place in the early and mid 1940s. Starts in the early 1940s. And back then, there was this thing called World War II, which started in 1939, but this story takes place in the early 1940s. And World War II was real bad. And despite it sounding like a stupid premise for a bad movie, the Axis countries and the Allied countries, both sides decided that they wanted to try and create a super weapon. Like, no joke. They're like, I want to make a weapon that's going to make us win this war.
And that is how Captain America was born.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the super soldier serum, which is important to note because they put part of it into that one guy who turns into the Abomination. Like, why does he look like that? No one knows. I think it's because he had, like, the gamma radiation later. So anyways, let's keep moving forward.
Wait, is that a Hulk reference?
It's Incredible Hulk reference.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay. They decided they want to create this super weapon, and everyone tried, basically. Everyone decided, like, let's sit down and figure out how we can make a bomb that makes a real big boom. And we now know this bomb, of course, as the atomic bomb, and there's a bunch of different names for it now. The Allies wound up completing their atomic bomb and used it on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I think we all know what happened there. It was this horrific amount of destruction, and that bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima is one that is often referred to for scale of destruction. Like, just about anything with an explosion or a massive release of energy will be compared to the bomb from Hiroshima.
It's like a fraction of it or this many times.
Everyone's seen the footage and you know how many people died from that one bomb. So if you can say, like, it's like 1,000 bombs going off at once that equate to that particular bomb, you're just like, oh my God, that sounds horrible. Some of the stuff that I didn't realize was the debate that happened. So the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945 had a lot of lead up to it, and then some stuff that happened afterwards, which is kind of bizarre. So when the bomb was created successfully, FDR basically didn't want to use it. There's a bunch of shit you can go through in history and like read a bunch of different accounts of how FDR and people reacted, but FDR was like, I don't want to use that. Like, it's going to kill a lot of people, a lot of innocent people, war crime style shit. How about we show people we have it, and then they'll know, and then hopefully they'll surrender. So that was kind of the plan leading up to FDR's death. When FDR died, Truman took over, and Truman's like, let's drop that fucking thing. Like, not exactly, but basically what that came down to is they had this debate all over again, and people decided, like, if we drop it once, maybe the war will end because people will realize we have it. So then they drop it. August 6, 1945, they drop it on Hiroshima. And after that, there's this other debate that I wasn't very aware of, which is on the Japanese side, where it's 1945, it's not 2022. If an atomic bomb went off in 2022, we'd all know about it right away. Like that thing that happened in Beirut, like there were videos on Instagram of that explosion happening, like, you know, minutes after it happened. But 1945, they've heard like, oh, there was a bombing in Hiroshima and there was active bombings happening all over Japan at the time. And they heard it was really bad. And that there was like some bizarre occurrence during the bombing of Hiroshima. And so they were trying to figure out what it was. And Truman basically comes out and tells them, like, we dropped an atomic bomb. And this thing happened in Japan where they're like, nah, like there's no way. Like, because they were working on one. And they basically thought through hubris, like, if we haven't figured it out yet, the Americans haven't figured it out yet. But like the Americans had like German scientists that had defected, all these people helping them. And so, like, the leaders of the military basically came forward and they were talking to the emperor and they're like, we should still, like, investigate, though, right? And they basically said, like, but if it is an atomic bomb, if they have done it, we're surrendering, right? And so, what it came down to is the emperor is basically like, meh, maybe. And so they were investigating whether or not it was an atomic bomb. And then 3 days later, on August 9th, they dropped the second bomb on Nagasaki. And it was very clear at that point, like, they do have the atomic bomb. It's killed, at this point, like 350,000 people around in just 2 drops. And then the war ended. They surrendered. So it's just this weird lead up. But here's the thing that I didn't know until I started really digging into this particular topic. It's that what would have happened if they wouldn't have surrendered? Because I've always heard that FDR kind of wanted to not drop the bomb. And then Truman's like, maybe if we drop it once, that'll be the end. And then they had to drop it twice. So what was the plan if they didn't surrender after the second bomb?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Is this why people say, oh, you dropped the bomb?
Well, I mean, drop the bomb is an expression that's been around since they were dropping bombs from planes.
Okay.
So I guess you could equate it to it became more popular after this one happened, because it's like if you drop the bomb, now it's like a big piece of news. But so what was the plan if they didn't surrender? Well, the plan was to drop another fucking bomb. And the core that's inside a nuclear bomb, and I'm going to break this down in the stupidest way I can, because that's the only way I can understand it, because I'm very dumb.
I just realized people say drop the ball.
Drop the bomb is also a phrase. Drop the ball is a different phrase. Drop the ball is when you make a mistake. Drop the bomb is when you like reveal something.
Okay. I was just like, oh my god, no, wait. Okay, never mind.
So anyways, if you want to know how an atomic bomb worked in these particular models, the quick rundown I can give you, and this is my grasp of it, is essentially to create this sort of reaction that causes a nuclear explosion. They couldn't figure out basically how to get the material to react. So what they did was they made a core, and this core is an orb. It's a 3-dimensional sphere, and it has a bunch of explosives on the inside of it that all explode inward. And at the center of this is whatever piece of material you're trying to get to react. And that sort of implosion, like that compression, is what, along with the explosion itself and whatever other materials are in there, that's what causes the reaction to happen.
Is it dependent on that material in the center?
It has to be in some way, shape, or form reactive. It doesn't have to be radioactive to have a massive yield like that. Like that's like what some later experiments were, was to try and avoid radioactivity. But, you know, it's basically you have to have something in there that's going to go boom. Something very, very unstable that has a very high yield. And so the core that was in Little Boy, Little Man, and Fat Boy, I forget what they were called. I apologize. But the one that was dropped in Nagasaki had a core that was identical to the Demon's core. And that's what the Demon's core is. So what happens is they're like, okay, well, we're going to need to drop a third fucking bomb. And they had to like handcraft these cores. It wasn't like they had like machines. It was like people doing this with like super, super precise measurements and shit, so they would know it would work. And then they surrendered. And so they're like, well, now we have a core for an atomic bomb, so what the fuck do we do? And what it basically came down to is a bunch of scientists that worked on the Manhattan Project were just like, well, let's just study the shit out of it. Let's see what we can learn from it. There's a bunch of other things we want to know about nuclear reactivity and like chain reactions and things like that. So they said, fuck it, like let's just try and study this thing. And the thing that sucks about that is in order to study it and get the information they wanted, they kind of had to activate it. Not make it blow up, but activate some form of like nuclear reaction.
Like make one of the atoms just hit something?
They wanted to see what the reactivity of the core itself would be around different materials. And they knew enough from the science that they had learned at that point to know there's certain materials that through an exchange or reflection of neutrons could cause a reaction.
Okay.
So there were a bunch of things they wanted to study from radiation, from the core radioactivity, energy output, so think about nuclear power plants and shit like that, and the ability to cause a sustained fission chain reaction and what that could be used for. It's safe to say that they had a lot of research that we're looking at that would eventually lead to things in the future that exist. The concept behind nuclear reactors, for those of you who have watched Chernobyl, like you know that like the closer certain things got to the core, it caused higher activity, and that's why when they're like, oh, it's too high, they started to pull those reactive parts out.
Right.
One of the things that's reactive is graphite, which is why graphite was the thing that basically caused the Chernobyl explosion, because they pulled them all out and then put them all back in, and then the liquid they went into caused an explosion. There's other things that are reactive to a nuclear core in this case, and a lot of the things they did was not with graphite specifically, but these experiments are like tiny scale. Like if you're thinking of an orb, the best thing I can equate it to, and you can see pictures on our Instagram and our Facebook, it's like a basketball. It's about the size of a basketball. It's the deadliest fucking basketball you could ever hope to pick up.
Okay.
So it's funny because like when you think about stuff like objects, like we've covered in the past, where they're like cursed because bad things happen to people that are using them.
Yeah.
This is kind of a cursed object, but realistically, like, they're fucking around with plutonium. Like,
of
course it's cursed. Like, they're fucking around with plutonium and radiation. And one guy named Harry Daghlian was running these experiments on the Demon Core. And it was actually called Rufus back in the day.
They named it Rufus.
Its nickname was just Rufus. So he's messing around with this on August 21st, 1945. And so he's doing this thing, and it's called, this is a weird name. This is the experiment they're basically running, or like the thing they're doing to kick it off, to like perform experiments and to measure output. It's called Tickling the Dragon's Tail. Which if you hear that, you think, that sounds like a pretty bad fucking idea. Like, would I want to tickle a dragon's actual tail? Like, probably. Unless he told me, like, you're only leaving my cave with my gold if you tickle my tail.
I mean,
I'd be like, all right,
soul
bro.
bonding.
Yeah, soul bond, hardcore, whatever. But it's like exciting science at the time. They're learning all this new stuff. So what happens here, and I know this is going to sound weird, is that they have these bricks. So these bricks are what are known as neutron reflectors. They're actually tungsten carbide bricks. So because of that, their neutrons are going to react very oddly when they're around something that's highly radioactive like this core. So he's basically stacking a bunch of bricks around this fucking core, and he's like seeing the energy output and basically a glow like get brighter and brighter from this core as he puts them around, because there's all this activity going on. And as he's like moving these bricks and stacking them around it, he drops one and it smacks into the core. And
so my God.
He immediately like moves the bricks off, like, oh shit, like I hope everything's okay. Well, it turns out that was a good science experiment if you're looking at it just strictly from science.
He could have blown everyone up, right?
Well, it's not going to trigger any of the explosives. I'm pretty sure they've taken the explosives out and they're just studying this radioactive material. But, I mean, he does actually learn a lot. So he freaks out because he's trying to do an experiment that's going to cause what is called, I think it's criticality, which is where this thing is building towards what's eventually going to be a reaction. When he dropped the brick and it hit the thing, it caused accidentally what's known as a supercriticality, which is a sustained, like a self-sustained nuclear chain reaction. It's not like you can, it's like, imagine a dimmer switch, and you're like raising the dimmer switch up and your lights are glowing more and more. But if you turn the lights all the way on, where they're just on,
it blinds you.
It's super bad. So he's like trying to do this thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoops, I just flipped the switch and it's on. And he turns it off really fast. It's like, does everyone think it's okay? The answer is no. So it was fairly new to folks studying large doses of radiation and what can happen to a person when
this guy died, I assume.
Occurs. Well, let me get to it. Don't jump to the end of my script. It's like, am I going to do that to you? It's like, so they all died terrible deaths. Okay, cool, moving on. So there's something I do need to tell you about radiation first. So there's a lot to know about radiation and how it affects you and the different types of radiation. But the two things that I need you to know is there's gamma radiation, which is fairly similar to X-rays. Not exactly. Like, there's a scientist out there like, Adam, come on. But
it's how you make the Hulk.
In comparison, it's fairly similar. And then there's neutron radiation. And neutron radiation is much, much worse. Because it penetrates a lot deeper, and it will penetrate your body in a way that gamma radiation kind of won't or can't. I know I used the word penetrate twice and now 3 times, so I need everyone to calm down, but I'm telling you this for a reason. So there's a safety standard for neutron radiation, and I did a lot of research on this, and it said that the safe exposure to neutron radiation is 0.5 rads per year. So higher than that, you'll start increasing your risk of cancer from exposure.
How much is like an X-ray or like getting your teeth scanned?
I didn't really dig into what like average stuff is, because the 0.5 rads per year is specific to neutron exposure, which is not something I think you get from any of those things.
Oh, okay.
Because it's very dangerous. I think they go with gamma, or X-rays are a specific type of radiation that's a little bit different than gamma rays. That said, you can get radiation sickness if you have an exposure to neutron radiation or really any other radiation. So around 35 rads, you have nausea, vomiting, headache, fatigue, fever, your skin gets red, it can blister, and it gets worse at higher levels. Your body can stop producing blood cells properly, sometimes permanently. It can damage your bone marrow, and so many other things. Basically, you have no white blood cells left, so you get massive infections, and that's around 70 rads. It's a lot, you know? So the higher it goes, you can get stuff like red skin that blisters and turns into massive ulcers. You itch from the inside because this radiation has penetrated your body, so like the infection runs all the way through you.
I can't imagine itching from the inside, like an itch that you can literally never scratch.
And your skin is basically melting off while you're the itchiest you've ever been. Yeah. It like made me cringe. Like you basically melt from the inside in weird ways. So Harry, when this thing went off, when he dropped that brick, he was hit with 200 rads of neutron radiation and 110 rads of gamma radiation. So he was quite fucked up. And he was doing the experiment alone, but there was a guard that was there with him and was present at the time. He was hit with 8 rads of neutron radiation and 0.1 rads of gamma. So you're like, that's a lot bit less than Harry. Harry died in 25 days. So it was one of the most brutal deaths you could ever imagine with all those symptoms I just described. He was 24 at the time of his death. So he was still very, very young. But the other scientists kept right on experimenting and jerking off the dragon or whatever it's called.
What the fuck? Why?
There was a Canadian physicist who was on the Manhattan Project who had helped create the atomic bomb, who was known for doing this test with the Demon Core as well. His name was Louis, or Louis, depending on if you pronounce the S, Slotin. And on May 21st, 1946, so less than a year after the other guy, Harry, died, he was doing an experiment. He was actually giving a demonstration to other scientists. He basically went around to a bunch of scientists that were interested, that were doing experiments with this. He's like, you guys want to study the core? Let me show you how to jerk off the dragon. And they're like, cool, let's do it. So this particular version of the experiment used 2 half spheres of beryllium. And beryllium was set on either side of the sphere of the demon core, and then a third half sphere was like lowered down very slowly so they could sort of moderate, like the dimmer switch effect again. The experiment did have safety protocols in place, with shims being placed in between all the materials to ensure they didn't get too close. If you're like, Adam, what the fuck's a shim? I don't know what that is. Shim is something that's used in a bunch of different stuff. So like, you ever watch like Property Brothers or HGTV? A shim is basically any material that's wedged between 2 objects to create a gap. So when they're putting up like subway tiles as a backsplash, and they have like those little things that they put in between all the cracks to make sure they're all equally separated, those are shims. So imagine thicker ones that's placed between the demon's core, whatever, between Rufus and between these like radioactive objects, this beryllium. And so that's what's supposed to happen. Now, Lewis had done this before. They would say that at the time, he's probably like the leading guy when it comes to experimenting with radiation and the demon's core in particular. And he decided the protocol just took too long. So he did what any nuclear fucking physicist would do after one of his colleagues was basically melted alive about like half a year ago. And he decided, fuck it. We're not using shims. We're using a flathead screwdriver.
What?
And he's just going to lower it down manually with this flathead screwdriver. And that's how he conducted this experiment repeatedly, and in this case. And as he was lowering the final neutron reflector, one of his colleagues named Raymer Schreiber, he decided he's going to look away. He knows it takes a long time to lower it. It's a very slow process. He's like, I'm going to look away, check my cell phone really fast. Not really. He's like checking on one of his experiments or whatever. And as he's looking away, he heard a sound. And that sound was reminiscent of what he would imagine a screwdriver failing to hold something up and something falling on the fucking demon's core would sound like.
Oh, no.
So Louis immediately, after he drops this thing, jams the fucking screwdriver in between both the objects, basically just like flicks the thing off the demon core. But at that point, the damage is done. And everyone's watching like, oh, what just happened? And the room has a fucking heat wave pass through it, and then a bright blue flash. And this is the actual journal entry from this guy that I just told you about, from Raymer. This is what he said of the incident. Quote, "The blue flash was clearly visible in the room, although it was well illuminated from the windows and possibly overhead lights. The total duration of the flash could not have been more than a few tenths of a second. Slotin," who's Louis, "reacted very quickly in flipping the tamper piece off." The tamper is the top piece that he was lowering down. The time was about 3 p.m. It was officially an incident now. The guard present at this time, because there's always guards during this shit, he knew what happened during the first experiment. This fucking dude saw the demon core start glowing when he dropped the thing, and he literally turned and ran out of the room, out of the facility, and up a hill nearby to get as far away as possible. And when the flash happened, everyone froze, and they all freaked out because they knew what had just happened. And so Slotin tossed them all pieces of chalk, and he had them mark where they were standing. And then after they had marked their positions, they were evacuated. And once people had basically properly been taken into care and the room was evaluated to make sure the room itself wasn't super radioactive, they did measure how far from the core every single person had been, and then they measured what the output had occurred. These guys are basically waiting for medical care, doing math that their life quite literally depends on to figure how much exposure they had.
That's horrifying, because all you're doing is standing there and you're like, how soon am I going to die now?
Yes. So one of the people that was present was a physics student, and he refused to be studied. He didn't want anyone knowing what happened to him. He basically wanted to be treated and left alone. He actually wound up living until 2001. He died when he was 81 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I'm going to give you the list of the people that were in the room, how long they lived.
How about how far they were?
I don't have the measurements of how far they were, actually.
Oh, okay.
So
that would have been interesting.
we're going to get... Here's what we're doing, though. We're getting closer based off of how many rads they received. So the physics student had NA, because he wasn't allowing him to be studied. An engineer that was present, he wound up getting hit with 7 neutron rads and 2 gamma rads.
Okay, so not too bad.
He didn't get it too bad, but still, it's way more than you should ever get. He lived until 1978, which was confirmed. He said that he was alive and healthy. And that was the last time they checked in with him. He is said to have died in 1988 from natural causes. Raymer, the guy who was the quoted one, he wrote that eyewitness account. He was hit with 9 neutron and 3 gamma. He lived another 52 years, passing away to 88 years old. So far, so good, right? These guys are okay.
Not too bad.
Nothing too bad. There's a physicist named Marion Edward Sisolek, I think I'm saying it right, who was hit with 12 neutron rads and 4 gamma rads. He died 19 years after the incident, but he had a really horrible type of leukemia that basically means that you start growing tumors within your bones. And it slowly starts replacing the blood cells that are supposed to be grown in your blood marrow.
Jesus.
That's what he died of, and he had that for a while before he died. The guard that ran, he got hit with 33 neutron rads and 9 gamma rads. That it tells you he was probably pretty fucking close when it happened. He died 4 years later. Lucky him. He died from getting shot to death during the Korean War.
What?
So there's no known effects of what happened to him because he was a fucking soldier and he wound up just getting shipped off to the Korean War to die there instead. A guy named Dwight Young was the oldest person present during the incident. I think he was 54 at the time. He lived another 29 years, yeah. And he wound up dying at the age of 83. But he had aplastic anemia, which means his body stopped making enough blood cells and infections just ravaged his body for the last parts of his life because he had no immune system whatsoever to speak of. So Alvin Graves had the second most exposure. He was hit with 166 neutron rads and 26 gamma. He lived for another 19 years. He actually died of a heart attack while skiing. They examined him after the fact, and they actually, this is bizarre, didn't notice any side effects of the radiation he had received. I think he's the one that got the superpowers.
Okay.
So,
I mean, if you're skiing, you know.
Yeah, he had underlying conditions that they think also contributed to it, but it's like bad eyesight. So he had cataracts, and then something else that's definitely not a result of radiation sickness. That said, Louis got hit with 1,000 neutron rads and 114 gamma rads. He had severe radiation sickness, and his official cause of death, which happened 9 days later, was his gastrointestinal system basically melting inside his own body.
Ew?
While the rest of that awful stuff I already told you about also happened to him. That was after that's when they switched the name of Rufus to the Demon Core, because basically anyone that experimented on it was thought to have been cursed or was going to die in some way, shape, or form.
I mean, if you're doing things with a screwdriver...
It's unbelievable how fucking stupid smart people can be sometimes. Like, why would you do that? One of the survivors, Raymer, the one who wrote the eyewitness account, he instituted safety measures to perform any experiments on the Demon Core moving forward. No hands-on experiments were ever allowed again. The experiments would be done by machines, and the operators would be controlling them remotely from a minimum distance of 1/4 mile.
What?
You were not allowed to be anywhere near this fucking thing. I checked it. I did the measurements. 1/4 mile is a bit longer than the distance of a flathead screwdriver. So it was probably a smart thing to do. The Demon Core was supposed to be used for additional tests, but it was so fucking radioactive after that, they had to basically cancel all of them. It got rescheduled to be used in a different test later on, and it was like every test had a bunch of different like iterations, and it was going to be in the third iteration of whatever test it was scheduled for. The second iteration, the one right before it, that one was botched, and it wound up fucking radiating a bunch of warships that they were not able to irradiate or uncontaminate in any way, shape, or form.
It's the one that they used in that one experiment that made it disappear.
That would be the Philadelphia experiment, and no. I actually covered one in episode 227 called Castle Bravo, where they detonated a bunch of shit in these like remote islands, and then it was too high of a yield because they were dumb, and they irradiated a bunch of people in warships.
Yeah.
You might be thinking that must be the one. Nah, dog. Completely different experiment. Completely different mistake. The U.S. government used to fuck up a lot back in the day, and they fucked up a lot of people with radiation. But in the end, They just melted down the demon core. They're just
What?
like, nah, we're not going to be able to use this thing for anything else. They melted it down and repurposed it in other cores. So it lives on in other atomic devices. I am all for the pursuit of knowledge through science, but if safety measures are ignored and replaced by a flathead screwdriver, not trying to judge anyone, but you're a pretty shitty scientist. Just saying, like, I'm not a scientist. I get it, but don't do that. And just as an FYI, you can count me out if a nuclear physicist ever wants to ask me the question, yo, want to see something cool?
Want to see something cool?
I'm a pass. So
yeah, no thanks.
That, my spooky friends, is the demon core.
Thank you for that horrible nightmare.
You're welcome. I hope you enjoy that. And yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that this was like around the time my dad was born. These experiments were still kind of being done. And it's not that long ago, guys. I'm not that old. So the things that we learned by, way of experimentation were kind of done in a pretty horrific and painful way for some of the people that were doing the experiments. So
nice.
Thought you all would enjoy that one. But
thanks.
You're welcome. All right. Before we move on into Robin's topic, we're going to take a quick commercial break.
All right, so we're going to get into my half of this episode, and I don't think I make anything better in the horrifying department because...
you're doing Final Destination shit, and so I don't think it's going to get any better. These might be accidents that happen. I think the ones that I covered weren't really accidents as much as like, why are you playing with plutonium?
The fact that, it's just some guy with a screwdriver... He kind of accidentally had it fall into the thing.
In Final Destination, they're trying to avoid death. Can you imagine, getting off an airplane, then it blows up, and being like, oh my god, I can't believe I survived. Give me that screwdriver. No, they're being careful. These guys are not careful at all.
All right. Well, we'll see. All right, so today we're going to be going on an adventure into Final Destination 2. The Destining. I knew you were going to do that. If that joke falls short for anyone, it's because you're new and you don't yet know how often Adam and I make reference to Taken. Yeah, damn it, that stupid movie. Okay, soon you'll learn how often we say stupid stuff like that. Okay.
Taken 3: Revenge of the Tokening.
God damn it. This portion of the episode will be dedicated to strange deaths and disasters that are worthy of something out of the Final Destination series. Whether that be coincidental or just absolutely horrifying, we're going to do that. It's going to be part of this episode. There are way too many to be covered in one episode, of course. That's why, we had Final Destination 1 and now we're going to have Final Destination 2. So this episode is going to be a bit of a doozy. There are a few stories in here. If you guys aren't into, horrifying accidents that have happened to people, this might not be for you.
I'm pretty sure I just heard every one of our listeners be like, oh, I'm into this. Let's do it.
So I've watched all the Final Destination movies for the umpteenth time this past week, and our friend Jess just kind of pushed me over the fence into wanting to really cover some strange and unbelievable deaths that are just crazy how it happens to some people. How did she push you over said fence? Oh, because we were watching a video on YouTube, and one of the videos was about a guy who dove straight into an airplane turbine.
Yes, that's right. That's horrific.
Yeah. So, all right. Let's start with one that is tragically coincidental. It's either that or definitely a case of Final Destination. So, on July 20th, 2012, there was a tragic mass shooting that happened in Aurora, Colorado. I'm sure you already know what I'm going to be talking about. Side note, the fact that mass shootings are this common in our country is
sad and pathetic.
That is an absolute travesty and something that definitely has to be dealt with. But many of you might remember the very notorious Dark Knight shooting. And it's just something that at least for me, is very memorable. I remember when that happened.
If I remember correctly, and I haven't done any research on it, the guy basically dressed up as the Joker, plotted to kill a bunch of people, then rigged his apartment with a bunch of booby traps and explosives because he knew when the police investigated, he wanted it to blow up.
He wasn't even dressed like the Joker. I mean, he had green hair, but that was about it. He wasn't a rendition of the Joker that we see in comic books and things like that. He just said I'm the Joker or whatever. He was insane. So at a Century 16 movie theater, James Holmes walked into a midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises. He came in dressed in tactical clothing and wielded multiple firearms and killed 12 people and injured 70 others, 58 of which were directly from gunfire. It's one of those events in our modern U.S. history that it's like the largest number of victims. And the fact that there are so many with such a high number of victims in our modern history is insane.
It's crazy that I can just tell you off the top of my head the one that wound up taking over that record because it happened in Vegas. It's October 1 because there was like 60 people that died. I think it was like 57 people that died and over 200 that wound up injured from gunfire because it's just something that keeps happening here.
One of the victims at this particular event was Jessica Redfield, and she was a Denver sports reporter who, in her own words, could be found, quote, in the studio, NHL arena, locker room, on a plane, or writing. She just seemed like someone who really wanted to experience life and go out and do things. She was at the premiere with her friend Brent, who himself survived the shooting. And he described the events of the evening and recalled how he watched her get shot twice, one of which seemed to strike her head, which is probably the one that killed her. What gives her tragic death the Final Destination twist is that she had narrowly escaped a shooting a little over 2 weeks before that.
Wow.
So on June 2nd, 2012, there was a mass shooting at Eaton Center Mall in Toronto at around 6:30 p.m. So Christopher Husbands entered the food court at that mall and just began firing on people. 7 people were shot there and 2 were killed during the shooting. Redfield recalled the incident, stating that her decision to grab a burger instead of eating sushi is what saved her life that day.
Wow.
And she said that she was in the exact location one of the victims was found just minutes before the shooting had occurred. So it's something where she escaped that situation and then it's like death followed her and killed her in another situation so similar. It's just like, what are the odds of that happening? But yeah, she ultimately fell victim to a situation.
I think there was like 2 people that after October 1 in Vegas that survived that particular shooting. They wound up dying in a Sacramento shooting. Like
no way.
3 months later. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, at another event too. It wasn't just like a shooting that was random. It was some like other event that was happening that they were going to, and they had to be like talked into going to it because of how like fucked up they were from the trauma from it.
Right.
It's horrific to think about.
That's really depressing to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, on to the next one. The next one is literally something that makes you think life is definitely stranger than fiction, because what are the odds of these things happening? So the next one, I've already kind of told Adam a little bit about, so he's like cringe right now. But either way, this event is something that was definitely pulled like straight out of Final Destination 2. In August of 2003, a surgical resident at Christus St. Joseph Hospital named Dr. Hitoshi Nikaido, he was 35 and fell victim to some faulty wiring that caused one of the hospital elevators to malfunction. And if you've seen Final Destination 2, you know where I'm going with this. But in Final Destination 2, the character Nora Carpenter is a victim to a premonition that she'd be killed by a man with hooks, when in reality, the hooks are like not what literally kills her. What kills her is her freaking out after getting her hair caught in some hooks. And she tries to get out of this elevator, but the doors of the elevator like shut around her neck. So the doors shut around her neck, but the elevator will not stop going up. And so her head's in the elevator and the doors are closed on her and it's going up, and she just ends up getting decapitated, which is total trauma for everybody in that elevator. So, for Dr. Nikaido, a maintenance company was working on this hospital elevator only 4 days before this particular incident. He entered the elevator when the doors suddenly closed on his body, pinned his shoulders. his head was decapitated as the elevator kept going up. Even more like the movies, there was someone
That's so awful.
who was in the elevator when it happened.
Imagine witnessing that and then being stuck in the elevator with this decapitated head.
Yeah, so Karen Steinow was in the elevator when she pressed the button for the 6th floor. She saw Dr. Nakaido coming and watched as he got trapped in that door. She tried to press the emergency stop button, but it wasn't working. She tried to stop the elevator and it would not stop. So it kept going up, and the upper portion of his head was found in the elevator, while his body was found at the bottom of the elevator shaft with his 2 pagers, a cell phone, and an electronic organizer.
Oh my God.
So how to describe this is like his lower jaw, it got snapped off, and the top of his head was in the elevator with her. The elevator stopped between floors and left Steinow in the elevator with the doctor's head for over an hour.
Oh my God.
She was trapped in that elevator for over an hour. According
Folks, anyone who listens to this, just get the next one. Or take the stairs. Like, seriously, it's not worth trying to, squeeze your way through elevator doors.
According to Ron, no, he wasn't trying to squeeze through the elevator door. He was getting on, and it just shut on him.
It's still, you know what? If I don't see those elevators door open and I'm the first person through, I'll take the next one.
According to Ron Steele, the Texas chief elevator inspector, according to him, a single misconducted wire disabled the safety systems that would have kept the doors from closing. The maintenance company, Cone Incorporated, was dismissed from ever doing their hospital's maintenance. I think the family actually won money from the case too. But yeah, it's just crazy. Because now if you shove your hand in an elevator, it pops right open.
Still not going to test it. I hold my arm out, specifically cover the door so it can't open. So if people are getting on or off, everyone can make the transition before the doors start to close.
Yeah.
But there's definitely been multiple times in my life where I've held my arm where I cover the whole door. Well, it's all the way
and
in the
thing. And it keeps trying to open.
And it shoves my arm out of the fucking way. Yeah. And I'm just okay, cool. I pull my arm back because I'm not going to lose my arm.
Yeah, it's just absolutely horrifying.
There was a fucking elevator when I used to work at Credit One. There was 3 elevators to go up and down. There's 4 floors. And one of those elevators, the doors would open while you were going up. You would see the whole fucking elevator shaft go by you. It was fucking creepy. And they would shut it down for maintenance all the time. And no one would ever ride that elevator. Even when it was not broken down, everybody would be fuck that. I'm not getting in that elevator.
So for this elevator, for days prior to this incident, there was a note on the door saying that the elevator was out of order. And that day, he walked up to the elevator and was like, oh, hey, it's working now.
Good job, guys.
It's just what are the odds that would happen? It's just horrifying. All right. So that was one from, the horrifying Final Destination series that actually happened. So this next one is something that I didn't think was actually real. The whole elevator thing, there's a reason why there are safety measures in elevators. I didn't think this next one could actually happen. So, in Destination 4, a character... Okay, shut up, okay?
I remember this one better than most of them,
okay.
I think.
So, a character named Hunt Wynorski gets killed when his ass gets stuck on an overly pressurized pool drain.
Nope, don't remember this one.
It literally sucks his guts out of his body and gets blown everywhere. It's fucking disgusting. But in 2007, a 6-year-old girl named Abigail Taylor was at the Minneapolis Golf Club in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. She was in a wading pool when she accidentally fell onto one of the pool drains. I guess the power of this drain was enough to get her stuck on the aperture and suck her large intestine and a section of her small intestine out of her. And she lost 6.5 meters or 21 feet.
Oh my God.
Of her small intestine because of the incident. The doctor was able to somehow place her organs back inside of her like some miracle, but she did die tragically 9 months later due to complications from a procedure that had She had to get a transplant for her small intestine, liver, and pancreas that were all injured during the accident. So she, like, during the whole thing, she was unable to eat or drink. Everything had to be
IV fed.
Yeah, pretty much. A suit was filed against the pool drain manufacturer Stay-Right, which is a division of Pentair. I don't know if you've had to hear of Pentair. They're like pretty common. I think, do they work on HVAC and stuff too? I've definitely no. They're a pump company. That's how I know, because I worked in sewer and water. So Pentair was one of the pumps and stuff that we would use.
I have not heard of them.
Okay. So, well, they're a division of Pentair, and they also sued the golf club. Abigail's death led to a new legislation to improve the safety of these devices in swimming pools. In 2007 alone, there were 74 reports of circulation entrapments. So people getting stuck on these, like, drains wasn't uncommon necessarily. Like, people would get stuck on them. There's a lot of people that would drown, like they would get stuck and weren't able to come up and they would drown, while others would get injured or would die of complications, kind of like Abigail. These drains are now designed to be unblockable, which is nice. So once they get to a certain pressure, it lets go, because it's like, we can't,
Right. The pump shouldn't recognize that it's not actually pulling on, like, fluid through it. It should just be like, no, turn it off.
Right. All right. So that one is something that I did not know was possible, but I learned something new today.
And it's apparently common.
Yeah, hopefully, well, before today. But hopefully you guys learned something new too, even though it's absolutely horrifying. The next one that I'm going to tell you about is a tale of a man that just couldn't escape a death at all. Like, Bobby Leach was the second person ever to go over Niagara Falls and survive on July 25th, 1911. So quite a long time ago. Annie Taylor was the first to do so on October 24th, 1901, which I thought was really interesting. I didn't know people kept track of something like that.
I remember hearing about people trying to survive going over Niagara Falls. I didn't realize, like, folks had accomplished it.
Leach did not go unscathed, though, when he went over. It took him 6 months in the hospital to recover from his injuries. So he threw himself over the edge of Niagara Falls in this barrel at the age of 53. I can't even imagine doing that at 30, let alone 53.
I can't imagine doing it because I'm not a fucking moron.
I mean, he worked for the circus before. He was a stuntman for the circus. So
there's a lot of people that work in the circus.
That one circus, Barnum and Bailey. That's the one.
You know what they all have in common? They're not fucking morons. Like, who puts themselves in a fucking barrel?
Anyway,
and goes over this massive, absolutely massive waterfall.
He survived.
Good fucking going. He was in the hospital for 6 months.
He had 2 broken kneecaps and a fractured jaw. It took him 6 months to recover. But if you think about it, it's 1901 or 1911. So there's not like all the fancy technology we have now.
Gave him an old ear nail and he was good to go.
Jesus. So he went on after that to attempt to swim the whirlwind rapids of Niagara Falls multiple times. This guy's a stuntman. He's like, I'm going to do this my whole life. Each time he tried to swim these whirlwind rapids, he had to be rescued by a guy named William Hill Sr. And this guy, William, ends up becoming a big, kind of famous guy who rescues people later on. So, he's a cool dude. So this stuntman, Leach, suffers an injury in 1926 that eventually kills him. He slips on a freaking orange peel. Okay.
That guy.
He slipped on an orange peel that eventually causes his leg to become infected. So his leg gets infected. His leg then moves on to having gangrene.
Oh.
And then they eventually have to amputate his
I've
leg.
seen knee leg turn into toe foot.
Damn it! Oh my god.
I gotta amputate that shit, dog.
So he slips on this orange peel, gets infected, turns into gangrene. They cut off his leg. And then because they amputate his leg, he dies 2 months later due to complications. What the fuck? I just don't. It's just.
This one seems less Final Destination and more like he really, really was trying to kill himself for a while.
But like the orange peel, how?
I mean, it's very crazy that such a small, innocuous object would cause his death. But, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like, something was going to take him down. I think he used up all his fucking luck going over Niagara Falls. So it's like, stepping on an orange peel, that was it. That's all it took.
That was it. All right. This next one just screams irony. So it's definitely... Did
this person die from screaming irony?
No. This one is definitely something that I could see, death pulling off in Final Destination. So in 2009, a man named Gunther Link, he's 45, he's a devout Catholic, and he went to Winehouse Church in Vienna, Austria. So what happened was he went to go pray to be saved after he had been scared to death from having been trapped in a lift/elevator. And while he was in that elevator, he was praying to God to let him out, to be released from this elevator. So he wasn't
literally scared to death. He was just scared really bad.
He was scared very badly in this elevator. So, according to police, he was really religious. After he was pulled out of this elevator, he went straight to the church to thank God. And apparently, he loved God a little bit too much because he decided to embrace/hug/grab onto a stone pillar in the church on which the 860-pound stone altar was perched. And the stone altar fell on him and killed him instantly.
Wow.
Investigators found his fingerprints on the pillar. That's how they were able to determine, like, he went there, hugged this thing. The thing came, fell down on him, and crushed him. Because no one was there to witness what happened. People didn't find him until parishioners came to go to mass the next day.
I assume when you walk into a church and you see this massive stone pillar with a person underneath it on the ground, you can reasonably deduct it has crushed him.
It's just
I could just imagine this dude is flattened under this pillar and fucking detective dipshit walks in
but imagine
and dusts it for prints and he's like, I found his fingerprints around the pillar. I think I know what happened.
Imagine going to church to go to mass the next day and there's blood just pooling out from under this altar. It's just fucking horrifying.
It's awful. Oh my God.
But imagine getting stuck in an elevator, thinking you're gonna die, so you pray to God, and then you're like, I need to go to church. I'm gonna thank God. It's gonna be great. And then you freaking get murdered by the altar at church.
I'm glad we've covered the elevator topic in this topic, so people now know to be afraid of elevators and pillars. So.
Oh my God. Okay. I mean, that's what JoJo's about, right? You want to be scared of the pillars because Dio was a pill. Okay.
I don't know what you're trying to talk to me about this shit. You're the one that's watched JoJo.
Okay, so the final one for this episode is going to be a tale of what happened to Elsie Bud Warren, who was 70, and his daughter Phyllis Jean Ridings, who was 52 when they died. So in 2007, the two were flying a homemade plane that Bud had built from an old Chevrolet engine.
Homemade plane just sounds bad.
So the engine caught fire while in flight, caused by a worn fuel line in the small plane. They had to make an emergency landing in a hayfield while the plane was on fire. During this incident, as soon as everyone hopped out from the plane's door, the entire cockpit went up in flames. According to Ridings after the incident, she said, "Nobody could believe we walked away. I give all the credit to God and my father's flying skills. He saved our lives."
Aw. I'm glad that one ended okay.
Years later...
Oh, God.
Okay. Years later, they're flying an experimental plane on their way.
What the fuck, y'all? Like, you flew a homemade plane, now you're flying an experimental one? Like, this one's made of matchsticks, and you're going to fly it through a dynamite factory. Good luck.
So they're flying an experimental plane on their way to an air show in Temple, Texas, when they notice smoke in the cockpit minutes after takeoff. I say minutes, but it was like a minute after takeoff. They tried to make it back to the runway, but crashed shortly after takeoff. the plane was a Raven 500, and they had built it from a kit. They had built it from a kit, which takes it takes Gundams to like a different level. How do you buy a plane from a kit and decide to build it? If I bought a Gundam kit that was like, you can build your own Gundam, you can control it and fly around, do all, I'd be like, fuck no.
Yeah, I'd be like, I know how Robin's gonna die.
Oh my god. But both of them were members of the Experimental Aircraft Association, which was something I've never heard of before. They weren't necessarily strangers to this kind of aircraft, you know? They crashed in a heavily wooded area as opposed to the hayfield that they crashed into prior. The rescuers or the investigators, they literally had to bulldoze a path to get to the wreckage.
Jesus.
So they tried to land probably anywhere they could, and that's as close as they could get. According to the Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA.
Thanks for that. I was really curious what that acronym was.
The plane crashed and exploded as it was trying to make it back to Montgomery Country Air Park. So they tried to make it back, didn't quite make it. The plane blew up on impact. So
wow.
Yeah, they did not make it.
It is a very dangerous and very risky phrase to say experimental aircraft. It is unfortunate. I don't mean to make light of anyone's death. It's a horrible thing, but just some of the things within the Final Destination topic have definitely been bizarre. And, laugh along with me. It's not, in mockery of anyone who passed away, but it's to honor them because we could only hope that we go out in like a crazy way like that.
I don't hope to go out in a crazy way like that, but if you think about it, they did die doing what they loved. They were in this experimental plane that they got to put together themselves. It was just a hobby of theirs, and that just happened to be how they went.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of things that we see happen on a daily basis that you would never believe. I mean, like our friend Jules, she's shown us a TikTok of this guy who avoids getting hit by a car, but then the freaking stop sign falls down and hits him right in the face. Like, how does that happen?
Wrong place, wrong time.
It just is insane. Things like that happen every day. And
it's really sad when it's people who, like, if you're flying an experimental aircraft, this is risky. But when it's people who are trying to do something that's like fairly safe, that have something bizarre happen to them, that's when it gets a little bit
just
sadder.
Walking into an elevator.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you could 2 days from now you'd be like podcast hosts die from microphones shooting lightning into their face and freak electric storm.
Please don't have that happen.
If it does, then everyone's gonna be like, Adam was psychic. So it's not gonna happen. But yeah, I there's certain levels of like irony and tragedy when it comes to these particular things.
I have very strange fears. Like whenever I see something sharp anywhere near my eye, it freaks me out. Or like if I've leaned down before and looked up and there was like a hook like this far away from my eye, and if I had leaned down right,
you mean
like
hook
anywhere,
like when we were working retail,
like when we were at
GameStop,
GameStop, yeah,
versus like a guy with a hook who would just howdy sailor, I almost stuck you there.
Yeah, no,
shark took
like
the
hand. Wall hooks from GameStop when we used to work there. They don't. I mean, back in the day, they didn't have those little stoppers that are on there now.
Right.
And so you would lean down and you didn't think about it and you could have poked your freaking eye out.
Yeah.
And it just freaking happens all the time. It's horrifying.
No, I agree. So, everyone just do what you can to stay safe out there. Never drive behind a truck that has a bunch of fucking logs on it. I think we all know that from Final Destination 2. So we're all equally traumatized by that movie, and hopefully it taught us a lesson. So
this morning, while I was driving to work with Jess, we were behind a truck that had materials on it, and we were talking about Final Destination and how horrifying it is. And as we were turning, the stuff in the truck moved. just goes, oh, it moved. It was just horrifying. It's terrifying. I hate it. It's definitely one of my bigger fears is like getting impaled through the windshield of a car. Like when a rock hits my car, it freaks me out.
I know. I've watched you freak out multiple times.
Yep.
I definitely think more along the lines. I don't think like, oh my God, I'm going to die in some freak accident that's going to be Final Destination style. I think it's just going to be like wrong place, wrong time. So for me, I always daydream when I'm like, not daydream, like, oh God, I can't wait for this. I always think like, wouldn't it suck if I were driving right now and then just like a stray bullet hit me?
Oh yeah, I think about
like,
that too.
I think that sometimes I'll just be driving. I'm like, you just never know. You never know when something like that's going to happen. So you can't worry about it because of that.
Like the other day, we were leaving the mall and I was sitting in the back seat and I was like, I'm going to put my seatbelt on. It's fine. We're almost home. Doesn't matter. And then I was thinking, okay, well, if we get into an accident, maybe it won't be so bad. I'll just, And then I was thinking like, well, if it's side impact, then I'm going to get pushed into the other side of the car. And then I was like, okay, but what if it's a rolling accident and then the car rolls end over end and I'm just like screwed, So then I go through this entire thought process and I'm just like, I'm going to put my seatbelt on.
Honestly, dude, I do the same thing. Mine are a bit more elaborate. I mean, I'm not saying I'm more creative, but I'd sit there and I think like, what if this fucking car is a Decepticon and it decides to transform?
Shut up.
How am I going to get out of this thing before it cuts me up? Because even if it's an Autobot, it's super dangerous for it to transform with me in the fucking thing. So, I mean, I go through that a lot, and then I decide, like, I'm just going to leave my seatbelt on. That's all I can do.
I hate you.
So, traffic safety. But, yeah, wear your seatbelt, folks. Anyways, I think that's just about everything we have for episode 236. If you want to send us a story, it doesn't have to be about Final Destination or radiation or Decepticons or Autobots. You can send us anything that's, like, supernatural, paranormal, coincidental, true crime, extraterrestrial. We would love to hear from you. We will read them on our regular Storytime episodes, not the Bloodline ones that are tearing up the fucking charts in the podcasting world right now. Not really. Seriously, they'll listen to it. But yeah, we're going to do the regular topic episodes every Tuesday. We're going to do the Bloodlines thing for a little while every Friday. And then once we have enough emails to read on a Storytime episode proper, we will release those. We're just going to drop them on you. You're going to see it in your feed and you're like, extra episode of Scaryish? I don't mind if I do. So yeah. So just send those emails to storytime@scaryish.com or hit us up on our website, scaryish.com. Click on Contact Us. That form comes directly to us or our social medias, facebook.com/scariyishpodcast. Twitter is @scariyishpod and Instagram is @scariyishpodcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scariyishpodcast. Those are monthly donations. Tiers start at $1. You can't really go wrong with $1. It's 4 quarters. It is certainly less than a Starbucks, dude. They're like $6 now. It's insane. And if you're not into the monthly donation type thing, you can also go to Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/scariyishpodcast. All your donations go to helping us keep this show going.
Indeed. So thank you to everyone who supports us in all the different ways. We appreciate every single one of you. And honestly, thank you to the people who sent out the wonderful feedback regarding Bloodlines. I put a lot of work into that edit. It's the longest edit I think I've ever had outside of the drunk episode of Nerd Chills. That one was awful. And this one was really fun to do. So I'm very excited, and I'm excited for what's to come. I think you folks are going to really enjoy it. So that said, this is everything we have. So I think it's time for the sign out. Robin, do your thing.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye-bye.
Don't get impaled by any random objects.